My guest today is Steve Mayer. We're going to be talking about how to maintain pneumatic de-ice boots, as well as some operational and some maintenance tips. And Steve, I know that de-ice boots are a significant investment to make in an airplane, and they do add a lot of weather flying capability as well. And I'm sure you're going to have a lot of interesting points to share with us. Why don't you start off by just briefly telling us your background, and then we can get into the meat of the discussion.
Sure, I'd be glad to. My background is that I have been involved in the aviation community as of this year, roughly 47 years now. I started out in the flight simulator business way back in 1976, and then I got into corporate flying, some charter and some checks and mail and ramen and hot dog eating that we all did when we were building time. I
Well,
got
well
all my
summarized.
ratings, one right after another. Hey, if anybody wants the best flavor of ramen, send me an email. I can tell you exactly which one, and I can tell you which is the best hot dog out there as well. But
That's valuable
no, I got all my
information.
ratings, one right after another, starting in, it is. Um, about 78, 1978 is when I got serious about flying. So I got all my instrument, commercial, multi-engine, all of those ratings. And then I flew for several years. And then I got into the aircraft parts business. And I was in the parts business collectively on and off for around 20 years. So I've got a lot of information about various products that everybody uses out there on their airplanes today. Feel like I've sold one of everything ever made. Then I went back to flying again for a little while. And I've always kept current with doing that. And then I got into the parts manufacturing business where I made parts that I used to sell as a distributor.
Yeah,
So I've had virtually every segment of the market you can touch. I've flown, I've provided the product, I've made the product, gone back to flying, and I'm hanging up my spurs here on the flying. I've had enough airplane rides, so I let the guys with. I have my own 737, by the way. It's blue and red and yellow.
ah.
And I share that cockpit with the Southwest guys. They fly it, I sit in the back. So anyway, I cover the entire United States. I cover all of Canada. I'm sorry, I am responsible for a distribution network that we sell all of our products through. And then I do a lot of training in the various IA renewals for the FAA. And so
For
having
mechanic
being a
continuing
manufacturer,
education.
I'm allowed to give the training on this. That's correct. So I can
Great.
continue to do that. So I do roughly somewhere between seven and maybe 10 of those every year. And then I do a lot of owner operator events so that we can educate the owner of the airplane. Most of the time, owners don't really know a whole lot about the airplane because they've not been able to do any real work on an airplane by themselves.
Right.
They don't have maintenance manuals. They don't have uh, product manuals and all of that. So we like to share this information with the owners as well, make them more familiar with the aircraft and the systems on the aircraft for a couple of reasons. One, we'd like them to stay out of trouble.
Mm,
And two is we would like them to have the best experience with the product that we manufacture.
absolutely.
And as you mentioned in the opening here, having a set of de-icers on an airplane gives you a lot more safety. It gives you a lot more utility, and it also makes the aircraft worth more if you should decide to sell that aircraft in the long term.
Absolutely.
But one of
Absolutely.
the things that we like to caution people with is that even though you have this system on your airplane, don't be lulled into thinking that it is something you should go and do just because it's on the airplane itself.
Hmm.
It's a safety measure. Most systems that are out there today are not what you would consider flight into continuous known icing.
Hmm.
Most of these systems are considered to be emergency escape systems by the FAA, which
Yeah.
basically means if you find out you're in situations you shouldn't be in, don't continue.
Yeah.
Make plans to turn around, get out of it as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
partially because we don't know what those conditions are like. They're not the same every single time.
Right.
And so the time to know that your boots are working is not when you're in the situation that requires the boots to be working. So this is why
That's
we
for
like to
sure.
have a little bit of advanced knowledge about the system, how to maintain them, how to inspect them, how they
Hmm.
work, things that you should stay away from, make sure that they do continue to work and give you a good experience with the product.
Yeah.
So with that fantastic opening and me having been in radio many years ago, I'm going to share my screen with everybody here,
Great.
and we're going to just jump into this, and we're going to take a look and see at what we do here
Awesome.
at the factory. Let's see if you
I see
can
it.
see that well enough.
Yep. That's showing up good.
Okay. Just for clarification, the company name is SMR Technologies. We're based in Fenwick, West Virginia, which is in the middle of absolutely nowhere. We're close to the Appalachian Mountains. You can hear the banjos playing when you come to see us. And if you ever saw the movie Deliverance, you'll know what I'm talking about. The name brand of the product is actually called Ice Shield, and that name became the name brand about 1997 or so. We are the original Goodrich people. We are in the original Goodrich factory. So we have a lot of knowledge about the de-icing systems and how they're made and when they were made. We have a whole complete engineering staff. We have DER on the staff. We can get our approvals and things like that now much quicker than we used to before. So this is me. Everybody can find me usually on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday, and they still want to know, you working today? I'm working 24 hours a day. It's a
Yeah.
nonstop. So this is a shot of where our factory is. This is Fenwick, West Virginia. We're about 100 miles away from Charleston, West Virginia. That's the closest outpost, as we like to call it. That's our oasis. And so we have roughly 140 employees here at the factory. And we make a lot of things that are in that factory besides just the de-icers. We like to call that the rubber room. We make the hovercraft skirts for the Navy. We used to
Oh, wow.
make the train car couplings for Amtrak. We make a liner that goes in the refueling boom on the KC-135 when the military jets are doing air-to-air refuel.
Really?
And we
Wow.
make air vents, overhead air vents like you've seen. So there's a lot of things that go on. We make propeller prop boots, we make prop harnesses, we make the pneumatic de-icers, and there's a lot that takes place at that particular factory. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at the systems that are on the airplane. One of the most common systems today happens to be the pneumatic de-ice boots, which are the boots that inflate and they break
Hmm.
the ice off, then they deflate and go back to the contour of the leading edge. And we also have a sister company that we purchased recently here just a little bit over a year ago. It's another way to remove ice. And we'll look at the different ways here in just a moment. But that sister company is called Cav Air Charlie Alpha Victor, and they own the TKS alcohol weeping wing system.
Right.
So we have a couple of different types of boots, and we're going to review the standard versus the PSA de-ice boot. Now, what does that mean exactly in English? Well, the standard boot for many, many years has been glued onto the airplane wing surface using a contact cement. It's a 3M product. It's called 1300L.
Hmm.
We put a coat of glue on the back of the boot. We put a coat of glue on the leading edge of the wing. We allow that to set and get tacky. And then when we mate the two together, we get a bond on that, which will give us a bond strength in roughly about 24 hours. The PSA de-ice boot is the one people are very familiar with in the industry, known as the fast boot. We actually invented that system when we were all still Goodrich people, and Goodrich has trademarked the name fast boot. They call it the fast boot because there's fewer steps in installing that boot. And instead of putting glue on the back of the boot and glue on the leading edge of the wing, we only have a pre-applied glue on the boot itself.
Hmm.
And then on the leading edge of the wing, we put a primer on there, and the primer is what activates the glue that's pre-applied onto the back of the boot.
I see.
And what that does for us is it gives us a bond strength that happens within 2 hours. So the boot itself is not different. It's the same boot. It's just a different process on how we install that on the airplane.
Probably
So
saves
the
saves some
1300L
labor, I would imagine.
standard boot is a little more forgiving.
Hmm.
It saves a little bit of labor on the front side, but on the back side of things, the PSA boot is a little harder to remove and clean up than the 1300L glue.
I see. Yeah.
But if you're an operation such as a freight hauler and you may come in the middle of the night and you need to change boot and go fly again in the morning, you're able to do that because you'll have a full bond strength within a couple of hours using
Uh,
the PSA. So we have to call this a PSA boot. It stands for pressure sensitive adhesive, which is the process. Anytime you have an anaerobic system and you deny something of oxygen, this is what creates that instant bond. So we have patented that process many, many years ago. And what we patented was the process of the two chemistries working together. Both of those are 3M products, by the way.
okay.
The glue on the back of the boot and so forth. So diving into this, most people would not know that these boots were invented way back in 1929. So they've been around for quite a long time. They're still a very tried and true system. Obviously, the materials since 1929 have improved greatly. So we get better performance than we used to have. And one of those performance enhancement we're going to cover here a little bit later.
Okay.
The question about ice bridging always seems to come up because ice bridging in the early day was a problem,
Hmm.
but that's no longer a problem due to the materials that we have nowadays.
Right.
So William Gear was an employee at the B.F. Goodrich factory. And back in those days, there were three facilities. They were all different B.F. Goodrich factories, and they made different things in the different factories. We happened to be in one of them that we, as we say, we called it the rubber room. And then in 1998, Goodrich decided that they wanted to consolidate all three of those facilities into the one that they are currently in. We're both in West Virginia, by the way. And we had an opportunity to purchase the building that we were in. And thankfully, they gave us the opportunity to do that. They created their own competitor. And the reason that we chose to do that was there were a number of things about the de-icers that needed improving, and they didn't want to make those improvements because that was an extra labor step. They were the only people making the product, and then therefore you get whatever they made, and you got
Hmm.
it whenever they wanted you to have it.
Hmm.
Um, but there were things that needed to be done, and that's why we purchased that factory. So the three initials of SMR are the initials of the three folks that were former Goodrich employees that purchased the factory and started SMR Technologies. And that was Dave Smith, Oscar Mifsud, and Pat Ryan. Oscar was the general manager of Goodrich De-ice Systems. Pat Ryan was one of the accounting guys, and Dave Smith was a marketing person for Goodrich people back in the day. That's how we came to be. So here are the different ways that we can do, as we like to, we throw a test question out there from time to time. One of the test questions is we have de-icing systems and then we have anti-icing systems. And we are known as a de-icing system. We
Hmm.
remove the ice after it's collected on the airplane.
Hmm.
And an anti-icing system prevents the ice from forming in the first place.
Right.
They both have their pluses and they have their minuses. There is no perfect system, and including the one that we have, it's not a perfect system as well, but it's one of the very best. And it's largely one of the best because it works instantaneously. We don't require any type of chemistry to carry on board, and we don't run out of air. And this
Hmm.
is what makes this expand and contract for us. So the other ones that are in the middle here, these are some things that probably the military or the airline type aircraft would use. And then when we get down here to the bottom, the sweeping wing, known as TKS, that is an anti-ice system that carries a glycol container, fuel tank, if you'd like to call it that. And it's got a pump, and on the leading edges of the wing, it's got laser drilled holes. It looks almost like a foil that's on an electric shaver. And
Mm.
it pumps this glycol out of the holes, which oozes out and runs back over the wing, and it keeps the ice from forming. So that's the difference between what we do and what our sister company does.
Gotcha.
Now, some of the things that people tend to forget or they don't think about is that a lot of people think that de-icing and icing season only happens in the winter months, and it's not correct. It happens all year round.
Right.
And it happens that way because anytime you're above 20,000 feet, anywhere in the United States, you have the propensity to get ice because as you can see, you get 3 degrees per 1,000 feet. If you're at 20,000 feet, you could conceivably be at -50, -60, and that's often the case when you get up where some of the jets fly, like the Citation jet, for example. We
Yeah.
often flight plan for 41,000 or 40,000, depending on which direction we're going. But
Right.
when you take a look at the turboprops that are very common today, the King Air, the Pilatus, and those types of aircraft, they operate right directly in that band of weather between 20,000 and 28,000 feet. That
Yeah.
happens to be the sweet spot for icing conditions
Hmm.
that's most favorable.
Yeah.
So you'll often see the de-icers on those types of airplanes. You'll also see them on usually the light twins. Largely, you look at those airplanes, they tend to be the revenue producing airplanes. Those are the working airplanes under the Part 135 banner most of the time,
Hmm. Hmm.
plus the fact that they have two engines on them. And those systems have been designed into the airplane when the type certificate was first developed. So we get a lot of these questions from owner operators that would like us to build de-icing systems for their Cessna 182 and for their Mooney and their Bonanza and on and on and on. But we try to discourage that thought because you and I can go back to the days of when we were taught no single engine IFR, especially at nighttime, because those airplanes were never designed to have an icing system like that on the airplane in the first place.
Hmm.
So we try to keep people out of trouble. We save them from themselves, we think, we hope. But anyway,
Attempt to
so this
anyway.
is where we see these issues. Yeah, it's in this little band of weather here where it's just 20,000 to 26,000 feet. And also a little interesting thing here, an aircraft tail can build ice at 2 or 3 times the rate at which the wings will do that. And you'll see this most commonly. One of the most affected aircraft by this particular phenomenon happens to be the Cessna Caravan. And the Caravan is very susceptible to tail stall.
Hmm.
And actually, the TKS system works better on that airplane because of the tail of that airplane. And FedEx is one of these companies that have changed their airplane from the pneumatic de-ice to the weeping wing system, largely because that particular system works a little better in that application.
I
But again,
see.
there's no perfect system. So certain systems work better on other airplanes than what we do. So taking a look at what happens here on the inflatable rubber boots, what they do is they are driven by an air source. If you are a turbine aircraft, that's going to be coming off the compressor section. You're going to tap that bleed air off the compressor, and that's going to run through a series of air lines and valves and pumps and switches, which we'll look at here in a moment. But the job of that air source is to inflate that boot and then it deflate it and vacuum it back down and hold it against the wing. And if you see on the left-hand side here, the ice buildup, and then over here where you can see the expansion on the right-hand side,
Hmm.
those are tubes that are sewn in there the length of that entire boot. And it looks like an air mattress that you would see at the beach, but it blows up within
Yeah.
seconds and just almost explosively breaks ice off of there.
Hmm.
And then if you're on a piston aircraft, for example, you're going to have an air pump that does that same job. But both of them, they're driven by an air source. Here's the part that people don't get to see. This is where the surgeon cuts you open and he looks at your heart when he's when he's fixing you up. So looking at the construction of the boot, this outer layer up here, this black layer is the side that we see when we're walking around the airplane, and we call that the breeze side. That particular layer is made out of neoprene, and in our case, that first layer is 10 thousandths of an inch thick. Just below that next layer, this yellow piece here, that's actually natural gum rubber. However, it's not yellow, it really is black in real life. And then where the magic happens is right here where you can see this little blue area. This is two pieces of nylon that is sewn together, and the top half of it stretches and the bottom half doesn't. But when it expands, it causes those three layers to expand and break the ice off, and then the vacuum system brings that back down to the contour of the wing. And then the bottom one down here, this black layer here, that's also neoprene as well. And this is what we glue to the airplane wing is right in here. So what we do differently as a company, and the whole reason really why we started the SMR Corporation was because de-icers have a known issue that it collects moisture inside these air channels. And over time, that moisture gets trapped inside there, and the stitches in here can start to deteriorate because they'll break down.
Mm.
And what we had wanted to do back in the early day was to protect that stitch. And Goodrich said, we're not going to do that. That's the extra step we don't want to do. And they didn't want the boots to last forever anyway. But
Mm.
so this is what we do, predominantly different than what they do is we protect that stitching. We encase all of this in these layers of rubber and we seal it, seal all these edges around here after this is bonded in here. We use a little bit more robust stitching, and then we also waterproof that stitch before we sew this together. So we
I see.
protect that stitch from moisture.
Yeah.
And so we have moisture in the air. Ultimately, we're going to talk about getting pinholes or getting cuts in the surface of this boot here, which allows more moisture as well to get in there. But this is why we broke away from the company so that we could address that problem. So if you look down here in the corner, you'll see where it says 23S series tube type, and then it has the 25S series, the sewn-in series.
Hmm.
Back in the early day, about 1975 and before, this interior here was not sewn in air channels. These were actual rubber tubes that were laid in there side by side, and they look very much like a 10-speed bicycle tube. So as a result of that construction, you have a little bit wider boot and you have a little bit shorter boot. And the inflation height is not quite as tall as it is on the sewn-in air channel.
Hmm.
And then around 1975, we made this change where we started to do the sewn-in air channels here and got away from the rubber tubes. And this process gave us a faster inflation. It gave us a higher inflation. And it pretty well solved this problem with the bridging, the ice bridging.
Yeah.
And so back around 1994 or so, the FAA put out a document basically saying it used to be advised to allow somewhere between a quarter of an inch and perhaps a half of an inch of ice to accumulate before you
True.
start to exercise the boots. Because if you did that too soon, it could be such that the ice would bridge over the top of the expansion and it wouldn't break off. Well, now that we have these new materials and better elasticity in the neoprene and the gum rubber and so on and so forth, we don't have the ice bridging problem like we used to do. So they put out a bulletin saying that you don't need to worry about collecting ice in advance and then turning the
Right.
system on because of the way that boots currently constructed.
Right.
And I think we discussed it. They reiterated that here not too long ago as well, um, in one of their publications.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
this
this
is
year.
all bonded together. They did. Yeah, they
Yeah.
came back and revisited that and they discussed that again. So all of these layers here get bonded together. There is a bonding agent that gets rolled on here. Almost looks like roofing tar in a way. It's
Hmm.
not quite that thick, but then it gets vacuum bagged and this goes into an autoclave and it gets baked at 300 degrees for about an hour where it's vulcanized. And then when it comes out of the cooker, we have the de-ice boot that you see on the airplane. So this is the basics of the construction of what most of these de-ice boots are done.
Yeah.
Inside the airplane, the part that we don't really ever get to see unless you're a maintenance technician, this piece here is a water separator. Anytime you compress air, you get water droplets out of it or you get water vapor because there's always moisture in the air at
Hmm.
some point. So we try to catch as much as that we can right there. And then as we go over here, we have an air filter here, which keeps particles of dust and dirt out of there. And then we go around the corner here, we have a pressure regulator. This is where we can set the pressure, usually somewhere between 18 and 22 psi. Back in the steam gauge days, this was the same air pressure regulator that would regulate the air that with the air-driven instruments like your Horizon and also like your DG. That was all controlled by that same regulator right there.
Mm.
And then if we come down the corner and around here, we have this is the heart of the system right here. This is a valve, it's an electronic valve, and it's called an ejector flow control valve.
Hmm.
And the purpose of this valve is to change the air pressure from pressure to vacuum,
Yeah.
and it cycles back and forth. You have a switch on your panel here inside the cockpit where you can turn this on to automatic and it'll just sit there and cycle until you turn it back off. Or you can do it in burst little manual cycles if you want to do, very much like your windshield wipers on your car. Pretty
Hmm.
much the same system. You can set it and you can forget about it.
Yeah.
And then after the air is expelled, then it goes over, it blows out of this exhaust piece right in here. So this is pretty much the heart of the system that makes this work. This is also an area that you should pay attention to because it is possible that you can collect enough moisture inside these airlines in here that this can freeze up. And it could be such that you won't get enough pressure to expand the boots enough, or it can freeze up this valve in here to where the valve doesn't work and you won't have any system at all.
Is that the regulator valve or
So
the
one of
ejector
the
valve?
things we like to try to express to this is the ejector valve here.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
this one, if you don't exercise this from time to time, it can get sticky.
Hmm.
So we like to tell people to exercise your system at least once a month, even throughout the summer months.
Uh-huh.
And when you do this, you want to look at this two different ways. You want to when you're run up, you want to exercise the boots and you want to look out the window and you want to see that the boots are inflating properly and deflating properly.
Hmm.
And then also at some point, you want to do this at altitude as well, because you might see a pressure differential if you're up at altitude. It may look to you like the boots aren't expanding fast or they might not be retracting quickly.
Hmm.
And it may also look like they're not expanding to their full height. And if that's the issue, it could be the pressure regulator needs to be adjusted, and it could be that this valve may need to be cleaned out.
Okay.
So even though we're not thinking about icing in the summertime, and most of us aren't, you really want to sit out there and exercise this at least once a month.
It's a
I get a
very
lot of
good idea.
questions that ask me if it's okay to do it in the summertime.
Hmm.
It is recommended that you do it in the summertime because
Mm.
that's when most people neglect to do that. But that's
Yeah.
why.
Makes sense.
So this is just a little schematic of what all those components are right there. And I have this in here. I had it in there twice, but I think I took it out once. Okay. So we discussed a little bit earlier. We say two types of wing boots. They're not two different boots. They're just two different ways of installing the boot.
Hmm.
So we have the standard boot over here, which is the 1300L glue. And then on the right-hand side, we have the PSA, which is the same boot with the pressure sensitive adhesive already applied. with a paper protector on the back of that, and then a primer to activate that glue. And for anybody who is interested, we have YouTube videos on both of those systems. You can take a look at that and you'll see how these can be taken off. We're going to talk about, you'll also see how you can install these, and we'll talk
That's
about,
awesome.
and then how you'll do a PSA boot, which is different. So those are out there, and if you don't have this slide, you can just Google it on YouTube and say "eye shield de-ice boots," and it'll pop up, and you'll see all the videos that we have there.
Perfect. Perfect.
Here's a guy, doesn't have anything on. You can see all the pinholes in this wing. This
Wow.
probably doesn't have enough vacuum pressure to even hold this boot down.
Yeah.
So brings us to our next problem is, let's catch up on this slide here real quick. Once you get these boots installed, if you've got the 1300L, let the boots dry for 48 hours before you exercise the boot. You can go fly. The boots are not going to come off,
Hmm.
but you don't want to exercise them until you've got 24 to 48 hours of dry time.
Yeah.
Then on the PSA boots, you can fly immediately after the sealant's cured, but they should not be exercised for a couple of hours. So you
Okay.
you save yourself 20 hours just by putting a fast boot on.
Quick question.
Okay. Now, yes, sir.
So any boot that you sell that's just a standard boot, you can also get it in a PSA version, is that correct?
With one exception, you can get anything in a PSA boot except for the Piper Aztec on the
Ah,
wings.
okay.
The Piper Aztec has got a 45-degree angle that comes off the fuselage, and that boot has to get built on a form that's got a 45-degree angle in the form.
Mm,
And
okay.
it would be very difficult to try to put that down with an instant bond. It would be a problem to make that happen work well. But
Gotcha.
yeah, the boot itself is the very same boot. It's just a difference on how you want to apply it, whether you want it,
Makes sense.
PSA style, or if you want the 1300L.
Okay.
Now, the 1300L will come off better if you have to change one out. They are also, if you had to lift one up, you could work some solvent underneath that and reposition it if you had to. But the PSA boot, when it's on, it's on.
Gotcha.
So if you've made a mistake, you have to either live with it or you'll have to pull it off and do it over again.
Yeah.
So what we want to do when we get there and we're the pilot and we're getting ready to go fly, we want to do our walk around. We want to take a look for certain things on the airplane and on the boot themselves. Want to make sure there's no holes in there. Want to make sure that there's no debonding of the boot coming off the wing. Any chemical contaminants, and there are some out there that are ones that we want to stay away from. And then we also caution you not to use unauthorized additives or adhesive waxes and polishes. And I'll give you the names of some of those things that we don't
Okay.
want you to do. So let's look back at these pinholes real quick. Here's what happens when we get these pinholes in there. We get them for a lot of different ways, but predominantly we get them out of a static discharge, and then we'll get them from FOD, rock chips, prop, throwing rocks up against the boots and things like that. But here's the problem. We allow that more moisture can get into the boot when you have that. We talked about earlier, when you do a ground check, look at the wings, make sure you're getting a full inflation on the ground. Also make sure you're getting a full inflation at altitude, and you may
Hmm.
not be if you have enough pinholes like you saw that previous picture.
Hmm.
Ambient pressure differential can cause a partial inflation in flight. In other words, there's not enough vacuum to hold the boot down because there's air coming in through the pinholes, and the same uh, principle that makes the airplane fly wants to lift the boot off the wing also.
Hmm.
And of course, we can get moisture into the system lines, as we discussed earlier. You can even get enough ram air effect that will give you a partial inflation. Our citation, we flight plan that for 410 knots. That's roughly 470 miles an hour. That's pretty good wind chill. So
Yeah.
you got to be careful with that. So, and also you can accelerate the deterioration of the boot. So any pinhole that's greater than 1/16 of an inch in diameter needs to be repaired with a patch and not a pinhole repair kit.
Gotcha.
We'll talk about that kit. And then you can have a maximum allowable number of pinholes, not to exceed 20 pinholes in a 12-inch square area.
Okay. Gotcha.
So looking back at that guy's boot that's got 50 pinhole, that he's not going to pass.
Quick
All right.
question.
We make patches. Yes, sir.
So, with regard to the static wicks, if some of those are missing, does that also accelerate the pinholes, or if you have a good conductive strip, does that just pretty much take care of the issue with the static electricity on the boots?
If you have a good conductive de-icing on there, you're probably going to be fine. The static wicks on the airplane back really are really more for your avionics than they are for your boot because
Makes
the
sense.
static wicks aren't touching the boot anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
They're just
Makes sense.
touching the metal part of the airplane, and that's going to keep radio static and things like that down. But
Yeah.
you should look at your static wicks as well, because if they need to be replaced, you're going to have problems somewhere else in the airplane.
True. Yep.
Um, so pneumatic de-icers can only be repaired with approved materials. And we say that because if you use a pinhole repair kit, there is nothing in writing that expressly tells you how to use a pinhole repair kit or to not use a pinhole repair kit or to even actually use a pinhole repair kit. Why Goodrich and we left that out of our manuals, I'm not real sure. But the problem here is that the pinhole repair kits that are on the market are typically an RTV type substance, which is fine. It is much better to do something about the pinhole than to do nothing at all.
Hmm.
But you need to keep in mind that it's a temporary fix because the pinhole repair dot of goop, as I like to call it, is eventually going to peel off. And the reason that it's going to peel off is because it doesn't expand and contract with the boot because they're two separate materials. Boots expand in a very particular way, and they expand radially. So when you see these inflation tubes pumped up, they expand out radial like this.
Mm-hmm.
And a patch, a patch has got an orientation to it. We made patches oval for a reason because they are an orientated piece of material that needs to expand radially just like the boot does.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made out of the same material that the boot is made out of. So the two work together. If you try to put a patch on vertically like this, it's expanding this way, just like it would be if it's horizontally on the boot.
Mm-hmm.
So if the boot's going this way and the patch is going that way, 90 degrees to each other, the patch is eventually going to come off also.
Yeah.
So this is why we made an orientation of an oval here to show you to put it on horizontally like that. Now you can cut the patch down in size if you need to do that,
You're right.
but as long as you keep the orientation correct, you're fine. So you want to make sure that you have enough patch overlaying the damaged area by at least 1/4 of an inch.
Quarter inch.
But in the case of the pinhole repair kit, the pinhole thing is a different material. It doesn't expand radially and it doesn't expand at the same rate that the neoprene does with the boot, and it will peel off over time. And that's fine. It's okay. You just need to know that doing something about it is much better than to not do anything at all.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that we have seen that seems to work the best in the field is there are some people that use PRC adhesive, put a little fingerprint of PRC on top of that
Mm-hmm.
pinhole. PRC is pretty permanent. And PRC is actually an adhesive that is used from time to time to glue the back end of the boot down We don't necessarily use it on our boots because we taper our edges out really thin and they lay down very nicely. The Goodrich boots are cut off square on the back, and you will see some rippling with those from time to time. It's not on every application, but on some it is. So they glue it down with PRC. So the PRC works fine because it keeps the boot from coming off the airplane,
Hmm.
but it also tends to work fairly good for a pinhole repair, and there seem to be a lot more permanent and a lot less noticeable. I did ask our engineers about that once upon a time, and they said, hey, we don't see any particular problem in that. It's just that you do want to monitor that as well, just to
Yeah,
make sure nothing's coming undone. But the important thing is to address the problem. That way you don't have more problems that pinholes that we just looked at that list of things that pinholes will do to your boots. So we do have some limitations and we do have some recommendations. So the patch repairs are not recommended if you have a cut, a tear, or a rupture within 1/8 inch of a stitch line on the sewn de-icers. It's different when the older styles still have the rubber tubes in style. The Goodrich old style 25S series or the 23S series still have rubber tubes inside.
hmm.
We make that boot with a sewn in air channel, but we make it the same width of what it would be if it had rubber tubes inside so that it does match the paint line when it goes back on the airplane, and it's got better performance than the rubber tube does. So if you have a cut, tear, or rupture that extends into the fabric, then we cannot repair that with a patch. We have to get a new boot.
Makes sense.
We looked at that. Here's our limitation on patches. Here's the size of patches that we have. We got three different sizes. 1¼ inch by 2.5. You can have three in there per any 12-inch square. Two medium patches, which are 2.5 by 5. And you can have two medium and one small. And you can actually have one 5 by 10. But I would say that if you need a 5 by 10 patch, you probably need a boot.
That's a
I
pretty big
have seen a
patch.
whole leading edge done with 5 by 10-inch patches.
Wow.
The folks in Alaska get creative. So,
I've heard.
yes, I've witnessed. All right. So, here's a no-no. Here's where somebody tried to put a patch on diagonally.
Mm,
That's eventually going to peel off. This was on a Cessna citation. Uh, you can't see this. One of these days, I'm going to get a better picture, but right in here, there's a little pinhole repair and it's starting to peel away.
yeah.
This is a example where someone did not get the PSA style boot. Actually, this was not our boot. This was a Goodrich fast boot, but this is one where the guy did not get it positioned correctly, tried to massage it into place, and then released the airplane to the customer and said, here you go. And so the customer, of course, called me and said, does this look right to you? And I said, are you really going to ask me that question? I said, no, no, you need to go back to whoever did this. They owe you a boot plus labor and
Right.
probably downtime also. If you have some reasons to tell a customer or one of your owner operators what the factory recommends as to why you need to replace the boot versus fix the boot, we can make this available. And this is directly from the horse's mouth. And it basically says if you see any of these issues, this is why they should be replaced rather
That's
than
helpful.
repaired.
That's very helpful.
Well, we all like to keep our costs down when we can, and boots are quite the investment, and we don't want to have to replace anything that's not necessary. Uh, but again, you don't want to figure this out when you're in the soup and find out that the boots aren't working well for you, and then you have some real problems. So
Hmm.
it's much easier to take care of the problems on the ground.
Yeah.
So what do we do? We get a whole bunch of stuff that goes on here, and this is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest question that I get all the time. The first and foremost thing that you want to do with the de-icers is you want to clean them. You want to clean them with a mild soap and water. You don't necessarily have to have this mil-spec cleaner. But what you do want to stay away from is you don't want any harsh dishwashing liquid detergents. You don't want to use something like Dawn.
Mm.
You don't want to use Joy. You don't want to use Simple Green.
Oh,
Those are all grease cutters,
yeah.
and they will tend to strip the oils out of the boot. So what you do want to use is you want to use a mild car wash soap
Mm.
and clean the bugs off and clean the dirt off of them. Bugs are acidic,
Yeah.
and I just happened to be in the hangar here when I was up in Des Moines and I was looking at the airplanes. This is a bug splat, both of these. But if I were to blow that picture up, you would see that the surface of this boot has eroded.
Mm.
That's just not a smashed bug. That's erosion of the rubber surface because that outer surface, as we mentioned, was only 10 thousandths of an inch thick.
So it etches it.
So the bugs will it will etch the boot, and this gives you a place for it to start to deteriorate. And it
Mm.
also gives you a place for ice to adhere even stronger.
Uh-huh.
So you need to get these washed off and cleaned off. These are just very much like they'll do to your car paint.
Hmm.
So once you get these cleaned off, then I'm going to bump ahead to that slide right there. Uh, We have a complement of boot care products, and there are several people out there in the world that also would like to sell you cosmetics and things like that too.
Quick question before we
But you
get
need
to
to be
that.
very careful. Yes, sir.
So if you're using a mild soap and you're having trouble getting the bugs off, just use a little more elbow grease, or is there additional products that might help with that that won't damage the boot?
Well, I would try to get them as clean as possible because we do have a cleaner. And the cleaner that we have is designed to remove any previous coatings of anything that's been put on there.
Okay.
And it might help with removal of bugs. There's going to be some things, if you're a little bit late and the bugs have already eaten into the rubber surface, you're probably not going to clean that up real well with soap and water.
Yeah.
But you want to get it as clean as you can get. And then we do have a cleaner, and this is designed to remove stuff that somebody else has put on there, or perhaps even something that you might have used.
Yeah.
But what we see out in the marketplace right now is we see people like a company called Jetstream Products, and they sell a product called PBS Boot Shine because everybody wants to make the boots look shiny because they
Hmm.
look nice.
Hmm.
Well, there are things that people have tried to do that are not recommended to do, and one of them happens to be Armor All.
Ooh.
Armor All has always been highly touted for using on your car interior. But your car interior is made out of plastic. It's not made out of rubber.
Hmm.
And it's got petroleum distillates in it, which will cause it to attack the rubber. And then I've seen mop and glow. We have seen shoe polish. We've seen
Wow.
vegetable oil.
Huh.
We've seen everything under the sun that somebody could think of that would make the boot look shiny. Well, they don't make the boot, so they don't really know what the boot is made out of, and they don't necessarily care because they want to sell you a cosmetic
Hmm.
for $50, $60. Now, I will say that I have seen boot shine, PBS boot shine, interact very negatively with MEK.
Mm.
I saw a guy that had some MEK on a rag and he wiped it across the surface of the boot thinking he was just going to clean it up a little. And it immediately alligatored and turned crusty and yellow, and it ruined the boot.
Oh
But
boy.
that was just a difference in the chemistry.
Hmm.
So the boot cleaner is designed to take off coatings like PBS boot shine, maybe any other cosmetics that you've put on there, perhaps even like we have. We've got an ice inhibitor, ice release agent that you can use as often as you would want to use it. But from time to time, you want to clean this off as well because you don't want to get too many coatings put on there.
Yeah.
Now, I would also say that when you get knowledge of somebody else's product that's on there, if they offer a cleaner, also you should use their cleaner to take it off
Makes
because
sense.
their products have probably been designed together.
Yeah.
There's a
That's
guy that's up in Minnesota that's got a product called Spit Shine. I particularly like Spit Shine. That's just me. That's not something I'm advocating.
yeah.
But Spit Shine is an acrylic and it looks exceptionally shiny. But acrylics over time can start to crack. And I've not seen that to be real prevalent with Spit Shine, but it doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means it could happen. But they
Hmm.
recommend on their packaging to clean their product back off about every third application
I see.
because you just don't want to get too much buildup going on the boot.
Yeah.
And so if that manufacturer does offer a cleaning agent, get their cleaning agent, get the coatings off of what it is that you've used or somebody else has used, and then start fresh.
Yeah. That makes
So
good sense.
the reason that you want to clean that boot off is because then we want to put a boot conditioner on there. And there's only two people that make a boot conditioner, and that's us, and it's also Goodrich.
Hmm.
So Goodrich product is called Age Master, and our product is just boot conditioner, but they both work very much the same. It's a three application process, and you need to have about a 15-minute dry time between each coat with a final dry time of around 24 hours.
Hmm.
Now, when you put the Age Master on there, be sure and mask off the paint line behind that conductive de-ice cement because it will stain paint
Okay.
and it will also stain your clothing. And so you don't want to go fly when it's still wet because it could possibly streak back on the surface. And you don't want that to
Oh,
happen.
yeah. Okay.
So the conditioner is designed to keep the rubber pliable and it will extend the life of the boot. And I would recommend that you put this conditioner on. Goodrich says 150 hours with their Age Master. We could probably follow that and say 150 hours because they're very much the same.
Yeah.
However, if you need to put it on more often because you live in a hot environment like Tucson, Arizona, for example, you might want to put it on more than 150-hour intervals. But I would say at least put it on right now would be the perfect time in the fall,
Hmm.
getting ready for winter, and then
Hmm.
also in the springtime, getting ready for summer.
Yeah.
So once you've done the conditioner, then you can put on top of that what you want to put on top of it. Now we have an ice release agent. It's a silicone base, so there's nothing in it that's going to attack the rubber at all. And then we have added UV protectant to this ice release agent. And it also works very well to help keep bugs from sticking in the
Ah,
summertime. And it's much,
okay.
much easier to wash the bugs off.
That's helpful to know.
Yeah. So nobody else that I'm aware of at this point in time has UV protection. Goodrich has a cleaner, they have a conditioner, they have a topical to put on there as well. They have a water-based agent, and they also have used Icex in the past, which is fine. This is very
Mhm.
much like Icex, but Icex doesn't have UV protection in it.
Ah, okay.
So this would be the proper care stuff to put on the boots because we know what they're made out of, and we know what you can do confidently and then not do and have an issue. Goodrich products will work on our boots just fine, and our products will work on their boots just fine.
Gotcha.
They will be interchangeable.
Yeah.
The only place that you'll run into where you don't want to use the conditioner is that Goodrich has some boots that their outer layer is made out of a product called Estane. And that's a proprietary layer that they developed many years ago. And they designed it because they thought it was going to be more durable than neoprene is. I don't know that it's necessarily more durable, but it does have some problems with it in a couple of areas. One, it won't absorb the conditioner. So there is really no conditioner you can put on an Estane boot. Even their conditioner
Hmm.
doesn't work
Hmm.
on an Estane boot. It won't
Okay.
absorb the Estane.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it won't absorb the cleaner, the conditioner. Also, their Estane tends to crack when it gets really cold.
Mm.
and you will see it snap. It's almost like a piece of plastic where you just took it and it snaps, and you got a line that's looks like somebody took a 3 foot section of a straight edge and took a razor blade all the way down it. And
Oh
you'll
boy.
typically see that where the stitch line is. You'll and where you'll see it happen the most is typically on a citation tail.
Hmm.
Citations operate at 40,000 feet. It's minus 50 to minus 60, and
Hmm.
they have a limitation, they say in their manual, at minus 30. Don't exercise the boots at below minus whatever. So
Yeah.
problem here is when you've been sitting at altitude for 3 hours and then you come down through a cloud layer and the
Yeah.
airplane's still cold soaked,
Yeah.
you're going to run a risk of snapping the boots, and it's
Hmm.
fairly common. But
Interesting.
because we're made out of neoprene, we don't have that issue. We've never cracked a boot. That's
I
why we
see.
stuck with the neoprene. But
Yeah.
anyway, the conditioner will not get absorbed on an S-stain boot, but the Aerostar doesn't have S-stain anyway, so it really isn't going to matter.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what we recommend to do. Wash the boots, keep them clean, clean off any old coatings from time to time. Make sure you've got a surface cleaned up that the conditioner can get down into. Otherwise, you won't get much in there if you got a coating on top of it. And then the ice release agent it'll make the boot look shiny. And you can apply it as needed. Usually we'll say somewhere between, every 50 hours or so. But if you're in a climate like in Minnesota or up in the Northeast where you get a lot of snow, Chicago's got problems, Minnesota's got problems. If you're in a high snow or ice environment, maybe every 25 hours or so, but
And
probably at some point, at
this
least
is the
after about the third or fourth application, I would clean it and get some fresh stuff put on it.
and we're talking about the ice release agent now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So now on all of these products, put it on a rag and then wipe it on the rag. Even though you got a pump spray bottle, don't pump it on the boat and then come back and wipe it on because you're going to wipe most of it back off.
Okay.
So put it on the rag, wipe it in one direction, wipe it all the way down to the end. Same thing on the other side, and you're done. That's all you really
Okay.
need to do. Um, we advocate, not because we make it, but just because we make the boot too. And we just try to have you have the best experience you can and also prolong the life of the boot, not to try to damage it in any way.
Hmm.
And this is why we like to make sure that the owners know that it's out there. You can put what you want to put on there, but we recommend that you put on there what we tell you to do because
Sure.
we make the rubber and the neoprene. So this is just probably more related to shops here. If you're going to be storing boots, if you have a customer or an operator that maybe you're stocking boots for, the best way to store these is just leave them in there. They're inside of a polyethylene bag and they're inside of
Hmm.
a box.
Hmm.
Store them away from sunlight, excessive dust, ozone, electric motors, and things like that will cause ozone issues with boots,
Mm.
and
Okay.
you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Um, People often say, do boots have a shelf life? Actually, no, they don't. They have a warranty, which does expire after a warranty period.
Hmm.
Our boots happen to be 5 years or 4,000 hours, whichever comes first.
Okay.
Beyond that, they are on condition, which essentially means you examine the boot for cracks, for stiffness. You've seen cracked sidewalls on a tire, stuff like
Hmm.
that. We have a test in our manual that can show you how to pump the boot up and hold it at a specific pressure for a length of time, and it is allowed to leak down a certain percentage.
Hmm.
But if it passes that, it's still workable. Now, at this point, it's up to you whether or not you want to put an older boot on there.
Yeah.
But we typically say in our warranty, we're 5 years, 4,000 hours, not to exceed 84 months, which is 7 years.
Yeah.
But even after 7 years, if the boot's still functional, you could still put it on there. It's just up to
Sure.
you.
Yeah.
But, we've seen boots on airplanes out there for 15 years, flying around in the elements, not even sitting in a box,
Hmm.
and they still work fine. So
Yeah.
But that's one of the myth about de-icers that they have a shelf life. They really don't. They
Okay.
have a warranty
Helpful to know.
shelf life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a perfect world, keep them in a hanger, keep them clean, exercise them from time to time. Make sure that you, again, I would do it once a month. Make sure that the flow control, ejector flow control valve is working.
Yeah.
Get some fresh air running through there. And of course, even though you're getting a vacuum system that's running all the time while the engines are running, you still want to change that valve to exercise itself from going from vacuum to pressure. There's a little slide valve in there, and you want to make that thing make sure that it's working.
Yeah.
But there's really not, it's not terribly difficult. I mean, it's just understanding the nature of the system and how it's designed and how it works and some
Yeah.
of the best practices to do. But overall, just make sure that they're kept in good shape. Pinholes get dealt with. If you need a patch, be sure to patch it in the correct way. A patch
Okay.
might be a little unsightly, that's fine, but the boots are still going to work for you.
Got it.
What other questions might we have?
So pretty much any boot that BF Goodrich makes are also available through you. Is that correct?
We have made every boot that they have also made, and there might be some exceptions that they may have done on some military aircraft years ago.
Yeah. But
But
so
as
for
far as
instance,
the
the
general aviation aircraft, we make them all.
so you got a choice
We,
between Ice
hmm
Shield or BF Goodrich. That's good to know. I had a question for you too on an Aerostar we're working on right now, where when you inflate the boots, they're only partially inflating. And so we've gone through some troubleshooting steps. We've made sure that the regulator is working as it should, that the ejector system, a duplex valve, is working as it should. Um, the timer is also, sequencing and doing what it's supposed to do. So I'm assuming that the last step of that is just looking for leaks. And we did find a rubber hose up in the wheel well that looks a little petrified. So we're going to change that. But is there anything else that you can suggest as far as isolating whether that leak is? And there are a number of patches on the boots. But is there a way that you recommend for tracking down and isolating where exactly is it leaks in the pneumatic lines leading to the boots versus the boots themselves? You have any thoughts on
Well,
that?
one way to isolate the boot right off the bat would be to unconnect it from the air hose
Uh-huh.
and put shop air on it and pump it up and hold it. Most of those boots usually are going to be between 18 and 22 psi.
Yeah.
So I would pump it up to 18 psi, isolated from the rest of the airplane, and just see if the boot itself holds pressure somewhere.
Okay.
So did I send you a copy of the boot installation guide? I think I did.
Think you might have. I'll double check, but yeah, I think you did email that.
Okay, well, in there under section 14 point something, 14.4 or 14 somewhere in there, there is a pressure check that you can do, and it tells you essentially what we're talking about is inflate
Excellent.
that boot to around 18 psi and hold it there and then time it.
Yeah.
And if it can lose 1% pressure within, I think, about 60 seconds or so.
Yeah.
It's laid out in there, but that will tell you if it's the boot itself.
Is
And
it
if the boot is
possible?
pumping up,
Go ahead.
well, if it inflates and it holds pressure, it's probably somewhere else.
Yeah.
It could
Okay.
be a leak in the airline. It could be a leak in the valve. It could be that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm wondering, I have to check on the Aerostar. I don't know if we have access to to the backside where that inflation tube is, or I don't know if we would have to debond part of the boot to be able to pull that out and do that. I'm not sure what that looks like on the Aerostar.
Well, you probably have an access panel in there somewhere. I mean, it doesn't have to be just as long as you can get to tube that takes you to the air inlet. I wouldn't say you have to go right at the air inlet, but if you can find the piece of tube further downstream and take
Good
it off
point.
of something
Yeah, that's a good
and
point.
just inflate it from there, that's fine.
Yeah,
But
that's a
that
good point.
takes it completely out of the system for you, and you'll know if it's just the boot itself. I think the Aerostars work off of a pressure system,
Correct.
but it
Yeah.
works the same way. It changes pressure to vacuum and then back to pressure again. I think the
Yeah.
Bonanzas do the same thing
Yeah,
too.
that's exactly what it is. It's got, two pressure pumps that are engine driven, and then it's got a what they're calling a duplex valve, which changes the pressure to suction to draw the boots back down after an inflation cycle. And yeah, we bench tested those. Those are all working good. Um, the timer, the regulator is working as it should, but it's just not quite getting enough pressure to inflate it. So I'm just trying to isolate it out and see what's going on. One of the pressure pumps is brand new, just replaced it. So yeah, just looking for pneumatic leaks.
Yeah, if you try that and it doesn't work, let me know and I will get one of our engineering guys to call you because they might have some further suggestions as to where to check that. One of our guys that is he's an engineer for us, but he also does a lot of the installations out in the field. He does the hands-on install training for installation centers.
Yeah,
I can put you in touch with him because a lot of times they may have run across this before and they're aware of some of those types of
sure.
things.
Yeah,
They can say, oh, it could be this, it could be that. But if you get to where you feel like you're pretty confident that the boots themselves are fine, then we probably need to look somewhere downstream and
yeah.
then
Okay.
we can get those guys involved.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. Well, this has been very educational. Thank you so much for being willing to, to meet on Zoom and to cover all these important points. I think it's very valuable information for owners to have. And frankly, I think a lot of this is beyond the knowledge of mechanics as well. It's good for both the mechanics as well as the owners to be aware of these things.
Well, there's a lot of things in this aviation business that have a lot of myth attached. This is
Yeah,
one of them.
this is.
Batteries are another one of them.
Yeah.
And so it's just helpful. The problem for the owners is that they've never been allowed to work on their own airplanes. So
Hmm.
you can't expect them to know the ins and the outs of it.
Right.
And so often when you go into a shop and you take the airplane in, you say, well, here's my symptoms, here's my issue. And then you get a call and they say, oh, we figured it out. Your battery was bad. We put a battery in, it's ready to go. Come get it.
Yeah.
They don't tell you what to do with the battery after that. They just say it's
Right.
ready to go.
Right. Exactly.
And they don't bother to tell you which battery they put in it.
Yeah.
Some battery brands are better than others, but
Yep.
some of these guys have been around shops for a long time. They just do the same thing over and over and over again. Doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily make them bad people, but it makes it better if they understand why you do something a certain way or why a different product performs a little bit better than another one does. In our case, where we protect that stitch on the inside of the boot, we get a 65, 67% longer boot life because we know
That's
it's a known
huge.
issue.
That's huge. Yeah. Yeah.
So you got $20,000 set of boots on your airplane. It's a good thing to know.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
um, this is why we like to make sure that people are aware of what to look for, why you want to do this, why you don't want to do something else, because it could result in something that caused it to go downhill and you get to buy
Hmm.
another one.
Yeah.
We like to sell boots, but we like to have you have a good experience with our boots.
Yeah.
We don't want to have any problem, especially when you're out flying in the mess and you
Hmm.
probably, there's people that fly instruments better than other people. And there's airplanes that perform better in icing conditions than other ones
Hmm.
do too. So
Yeah. Yeah.
the more you can share education with somebody and keep them out of trouble and then keep their airplane functioning correctly, you have a bigger safety margin.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Agree
ironically,
100%.
I tried to kill myself in the early 80s, getting iced up in an airplane, which I shouldn't have been in, single engine IFR night. Did everything the book said, don't do it.
Wow.
40 years later, I'm selling de-icers. I can, I
Yeah.
can speak, I can speak from experience. I would have written a check for any amount of money that night, just to make sure
Oh, well,
I didn't even have boots on the airplane.
yeah,
And
I'll
so
bet.
it's
Yeah.
true. Don't do it. And I'm
Yeah.
lucky. But
Yeah.
um,
Well, we're glad you're here to tell the story.
well, we appreciate the Aerostar community. It's a great airplane.
It really is.
Um,
Yeah.
it's one of those that I wish Piper gave a little bit more attention to. There's so many manufacturers out there. They come along with the next new model, and you find out later there are just some airplanes that can't be replaced by something else new. And this is why
Hmm.
you're going to see
Yeah.
the Merlin Metros are still out there, the Aerostars are still out there, the Beach Jets are still out there because
Hmm.
they do stuff that the other airplanes just won't do.
Agree
And
100%. Yeah.
the Aerostar is one of those airplanes. And
Yeah.
thankfully there is a community that loves that airplane, and they'll
Hmm.
work very hard to keep it flying, and the Comanche's another one.
Yeah.
So we're all in this thing together, and we all
Indeed.
have a part to play. And the more we can contribute to a favorable outcome, we really should be doing that.
Yeah, I agree. Well,
So it's my
thanks
pleasure to
again.
help out. You have my phone number. You've got my email address. Anytime you need some help or you have a question on something, feel free to call me or send me an email or whatever you need. Let me know.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
My my pleasure. Absolutely.